Robocop and video games. A combo that, in theory, should work great together, but somehow every attempt at a Robocop video game has always ended up being less than stellar. Take Robocop on the NES for example. This game is not very good. Poor controls, terrible gameplay, and just overall really bad. Well, thankfully, after that, we would see the release of another Robocop game in the form of Robocop for the original Xbox. And just in the box art alone, I mean, I don't even have to tell you this game sucks. The game tells you itself just from the art alone. After Robocop and the original Xbox flopped, Robocop would leave the world of video games for good. At least until 2019 when he showed up in Mortal Kombat 11, which was pretty cool. Weirdly enough, he also showed up in Fortnite, which, Anyways, fast forward to 2021 when Robocop Rogue City was announced, a brand new Robocop game exclusively for next gen and Switch. Now I am a big fan of Robocop. He's not only one of my favorite characters of all time, but also my favorite WCW superstar as well. That part's not a joke by the way, I'm serious. Point is, I love the character of Robocop and I was genuinely excited for this game. The game was set for release in June 2023. September of 2023. It didn't release till November 2nd. Look, this was coming from Teon, the same people who developed the Rambo game for Xbox 360, so I was perfectly fine with waiting another 2 months for the game. Fast forward to November 2nd, I walked into GameStop, picked up the game, brought it home, and look, as excited as I was for the game, I didn't get around to really playing it fully, until now. And I gotta say, this game is fantastic. The gameplay is dumb fun, the story is action-packed, and the game is just overall a lot of fun to play. So without further ado, let's dive into all these things and find out what makes Robocop Rogue City so awesome. The first thing I want to talk about regarding this game is the gameplay, which is nothing short of incredible. Robocop feels great to play as in this game. I think a lot of people were worried about how Robocop would control in this game, as he is a pretty slow moving character in the movies. Fortunately, I think Teon did a great job with the movement, as Robocop never feels sluggish or anything. It is a little slow, yeah, but compared to every other FPS that's out right now that focuses more on being fast paced, this is a nice change of pace. But the slowness isn't really a problem because there are upgrades like the dash ability you can get later on to evade enemies and get around quicker. Outside of movement, the combat is exactly how it should be for a Robocop game. Every shootout is action-packed and filled with explosions, destructions, and tons of blood and gore. One of the biggest things that makes Robocop, well, Robocop, is the crazy amounts of blood and gore. It was a huge part of the movies, minus Robocop 3, and thankfully the blood and gore in this game is awesome. This game is violent, which is what I like to see. The insane over-the-top violence just makes the gameplay 1,000 times more exciting. There's nothing more fun than picking up an enemy by the throat and throwing them out a window or across a room. Now, while this game is an FPS, I'd say it's more like an RPG than anything, as it does have those slight RPG elements to it. There are skill trees where you can upgrade Robocop himself, and even one that lets you upgrade the Auto 9. Robocop's skill tree is really nothing special, but the Auto 9s is one of the most unique skill trees I've ever seen. It's more or less just a puzzle minigame where you have to piece together all your upgrade chips just right to make sure you don't make every stat percentage go into the negatives. It's really cool, and I hope more games take from this. Another really cool thing about this game's gameplay is the fact that there's occasional choices that you'll have to make throughout the story, most of which can actually make a pretty big impact on the story depending on what you choose. When the game says a character will remember a choice you make, it really means it.
Diamonds are made under great pressure.
With all that great advice of yours, diamonds are made under great pressure.
Now when it comes to content, this game is just loaded with it. In total, there's 57 missions, giving you 31 main story missions and 27 side missions to complete. The game is about 9.5 hours long and doesn't feel like a chore to get through. The weakest part of the gameplay though is by far the boss battles. The first fight with Ed 209 is one of the most lackluster boss fights I've ever seen. Also, that's not a spoiler, Ed 209 209 is quite literally on the back of the box. Essentially, all this boss battle sees you doing is taking cover to avoid getting shot by Ed, and then popping out to take shots at him. Remember how I mentioned the destruction very briefly earlier? Well, now's the perfect time for me to mention that damn near everything is destructible in this game. In certain sections this is fine, but during this boss fight it became a problem because every form of cover would almost always get torn up by Ed. I ended up just cheesing my way through the fight though by standing behind a pillar and just continuously shooting at him. Overall, aside from the lackluster boss fights, the gameplay is pretty fantastic. This game does a really great job of making you feel like you're actually playing as Robocop. Just for the gameplay alone, I would say this game is worth giving a try. If you want a fun Robocop game that feels like the movies and has great gameplay mechanics, this is definitely the game to play. Now before I get to the story, I very briefly wanted to talk about the visuals of this game because this game looks damn good. Everything about this game's graphics, from the excellent looking lighting to the great use of ray traced reflections, perfectly encapsulates the look of old Detroit from the movies. It doesn't matter whether you're playing in performance mode or quality graphics mode on the PS5 or Series X, this game will look great regardless. Speaking of which, old Detroit looks insanely good in this game, and the same can be said for every other environment featured in here. Even Robocop himself looks absolutely fantastic. Hell, even during cutscenes, Robocop looks so good in fact that at times I genuinely forgot I was playing a video game and thought I was just watching Robocop 1 or 2. Now yeah, some of the models don't look perfect, but considering just how good the rest of the game looks, I'm willing to let a few iffy looking models slide. This game even features the likeness of almost every actor who starred in the original movie. The one thing I love about this game is the authenticity of it all. Everything that's featured in this game looks like it was ripped straight out of the movies. Now that I've talked about the visuals though, let's talk about the biggest part and, in my opinion, the best part of the game, the story. Now, as much as I would love to go in depth on the story and talk about it fully like I did with my review of the Amazing Spider-Man game on Xbox 360, considering this game is a relatively new release and that the story is actually good and worth playing through, I'm just gonna give a brief summary and my overall thoughts on the story to avoid spoiling it for any of you who might be interested in checking the game out. The game begins with a group of criminals named the Torchheads taking over the Channel 9 building, where their leader Soot talks about how they're the #1 leaders of nuke distribution in old Detroit. This immediately sets up the game as being set after the events of Robocop 2. This whole game is more or less just the middle ground between Robocop 2 and 3, but in my mind, this game is the real Robocop 3. I swear, playing this game and just thinking of it as the definitive sequel to Robocop 2 just makes the story even better than it already is. The main focus of this game's story is on Alex Murphy as he struggles with his identity and humanity. The way this is handled in this game is excellent, and it just adds even more depth to the character of Robocop. During the story, you'll get to explore different locations from the movies, such as the Detroit police station, old Detroit itself, the old mill where Murphy fucking died in the first movie. Just about every location in this game is nearly one-to-one with how they looked in the movie. Even a lot of the characters you'll interact with are ripped straight from the movie, such as Sergeant Reed, Officer Cecil, Officer Lewis, and many, many more. They even got Peter Weller to come back and reprise his role as Robocop for this game, which is just fucking awesome. Overall, the story, as I mentioned earlier, consists of 31 main missions and lasts about 9.5 hours. The whole story of this game felt like you were playing through one long 80s B action movie, which is how it should be. This game's only $60 too, so for your money, you get a great story, quite a bit of extra content in the side missions, and essentially just a damn good Robocop movie. All in all, if you want to forget Robocop 3 exists and want to immerse yourself in a great Robocop story that I would say is about as good as the story of the first movie, then this game is really worth picking up. As good as the gameplay and story are though, it's not all perfect, as there are a few minor flaws, which is what I want to go ahead and talk about next. Now look, I knew this game would have problems. It is a licensed game after all, and considering this is coming from the same people who made the Rambo video game, I didn't expect the problems to be quite as bad as they were when playing the game for this video. The first issue I want to talk about is this weird pixelation effect that shows up during transitions on cutscenes. It's an issue that has been around since launch, and for whatever reason, still hasn't been fixed yet. Keep in mind, I'm playing the game on PS5, so this issue might not be a thing on PC or Series X. I have no idea, but it was happening to me on PS5, so just for that, I'm mentioning it here in this video. Another issue that's been around since launch is the terrible lip syncing and sound quality. For whatever reason, about halfway through the game, my sound just completely shit itself. During cutscenes, audio would be severely delayed compared to what was happening on screen. At first I thought it was my capture card, but after troubleshooting a bit, I came to the conclusion that this game just does not have very good sound design. The lip syncing issues are more or less just due to the fact that Taeyeon didn't really animate lips properly, and honestly, that didn't even really bother me that much. My biggest issue though was the sound, and it's kinda sad to see issues this big haven't been fixed. In conclusion, Robocop Rogue City is a fantastic game, and while it's not perfect with the bugs and glitches I just mentioned, it's still a really fun experience that's worth checking out. There's just so many references and little details hidden throughout the game that any Robocop fan will be sure to enjoy. This is really one of the best games I've seen when it comes to the amount of fan service just crammed into it. If you're a big fan of Robocop, I highly suggest picking up this game as you're guaranteed to have a lot of fun with it. Fuck Robocop 3.